David, you don't have I Hear America Singing, right? You weren't even here Monday? No, so you must be really under the weather, huh? I'm sorry to hear that. I'm going to give you a lot of stuff. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. I just want you to have everything that you need, and then we can go through it later. And Mrs. Murphy will be here block 4 too, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, while we're getting situated, if you could please clear your desks except for the writing utensils that are already there for you, the blue and red pens, the pink highlighters. If you have another writing utensil that you like to use, a pencil, a purple pen, something with fuzzy doodads at the top, whatever makes you happy, you could take that out. You need your questioning rubric from yesterday and your homework from last night, which would be your copy of Langston Hughes' poem, I Too, with your annotations. And if your discussion questions are not on the poem itself, you should take those out as well. All right, kiddo, so we started a brand new unit this week. And the two pieces of literature that we're starting with are I Hear America Singing by Walt Whitman and I Too by Langston Hughes. And we're looking at how these poems start, we're going to analyze them and talk about how they can help us start to answer the essential question. Yes, babe? Please. Yep, absolutely. Our focus for the first part of the unit is really getting everybody here to a point where you can ask your own discussion questions and lead your own discussions about text, kind of like what you've been starting to do with either Socratic Circle or literature circles. Yes, babe? You totally can, because it would help you. You don't have to, but you can. So what we're going to do, you're going to need some time to get caught up. So I'll talk to Mrs. Murphy about how she wants to get you caught up with this poem. For now, you can start by focusing on this one, since this is what your classmates read last night for homework. If you want to start to read through it and make some annotations about what you think about it, we're also talking about questioning. Everything will start to make more sense as we get into class, and then when we start to do some group work, I'll come over and touch base with you, okay? And then we're going to fill this chart out for every piece of literature we read during the unit. Poetry, informational text, narrative text, okay? So I'm going to give all this to you again. You don't need to understand it or feel comfortable right now. I just want you to have it. All right, so let's see. Everybody has questioning rubric, I Too by Langston Hughes with your annotations, with last night's discussion questions, and writing utensils, correct? Excellent. Okay, so then let's get started. Good morning. How is everybody this morning? Tired, good, little combination. I know, first period's hard. Still waking up. The good news is that you only have 2 days to the weekend. Yay. Just so that we kind of touch base and remember what it is that we're working on, we started Unit 3 this week. Our essential question for Unit 3 is, how does an author's presentation of information affect one's understanding of history? We've started just a teeny tiny bit to work toward answering that question by analyzing I Hear America Singing by Walt Whitman. So you've reread the poem, you've listened to a dramatic reading of the poem, you've made annotations, you've analyzed discussion questions about it, you've written questions about it, you've answered questions about it. So hopefully at this point you have a very thorough understanding of not only Walt Whitman's message, but the devices he uses to convey that message. Our focus today will continue to work on questioning. Yesterday, you analyzed some questions that I wrote about I Hear America Singing that you then were able to use for discussion. Today, we really want to get you doing some of the questioning and using that for discussion. So, our objectives for today, these are for you, so they start out, I will. Do I have a volunteer, somebody who can see this? Can somebody read the first objective aloud and everybody else can follow along in their heads? Christiana, can you see that?
I will use annotations to develop critical questions in order to analyze an author's message, perspective, and purpose.
Excellent. So that's the first thing that we're going to work on. And then the second part, can somebody read I will, and then the second part of our objectives for today? Kristen, you're nice and close. You can see that?
I will collaborate with peers effectively and respectfully to revise questions and analyze text with deeper understanding.
Excellent. So we're really going to go through a process, make sure that our questions are really interesting, critical questions that have the attributes we've been talking about, and then we're going to use those to have discussion to deepen our understanding of I2 so that we can eventually, this is block 4, we'll come back together and we'll look at Walt Whitman's perspective on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, Langston Hughes' perspective on that and his message, and we'll start to look at both of those pieces and how we can put them together to start to think about the essential question. Okay, so everybody should have writing utensils, Langston Hughes' annotated poem with your discussion questions on your desk, and the questioning rubric. Before we get into our first task, I'd like you to turn to the person next to you, and Connor, you're going to have to help David out since he's been out. There are a couple of things we've been talking about. I want you to discuss, A, why do we ask questions of text or either of what we're reading, what we're listening to, what we're viewing or seeing? Why do we ask questions? What is one way we could go about asking questions? What's a process for asking questions of text or what we're seeing or listening to? And what are some of the critical attributes of really good questions? So what do good questions look like? Why do we ask them? And what's at least one way we can go about asking questions or forming questions for ourselves? Talk about it with the person sitting next to you and be ready to report what your partner says. Okay, so you can discuss all 3 of those questions now and be ready to report out what your partner said. You can work as a group if that's easier, or if you just want to talk partner to partner, this way you can each just only have to listen to and report back on one person. It might be easier to manage.
Why do we ask questions? Yeah, I think we ask questions to understand the text better. You're reading what something is saying in the text, you don't understand. So if we ask questions by somebody else,
Sounds like you maybe came at the end of the conversation. Do you feel like you can report out on what your partner said? You need to, so then maybe review, use active listening skills. Yes. That's a good question. Yes, where your question is about questioning. What are the critical attributes of interesting discussion questions or critical questions? Why do we ask interesting, critical discussion questions? And what's one way to go about asking questions of text? A process. What, why, and how? Let's take one more minute to wrap up what we're talking about, either with your partner, your pair, or within your group, which some of you chose to do. Why do we ask questions? How do we question? And what are the critical attributes of good questions? So I'm going to come back to you in 1 minute and start to call on tables to report.
Well, when you're asking a question, you have to decide if you want it to be like open-ended or answer. It would probably be open-ended. Well, depending on what your question is. Is it good after this one starts and
Ladies, what did you say about why we have to ask critical questions? Great. Terrific. Are there any other possibilities besides better understanding and clarifying? Because I think you're absolutely correct about those. So my challenge to you is there anything else, another reason why we could possibly question text? Okay, let's come back together. All right, so let's start. Actually, we'll go in reverse of the order I gave you the questions. Let's start with the what first. What are the critical attributes of really good, thoughtful discussion questions. Things that either you can think about further in your head or that you could discuss with other people. And it's not cheating if you chose to use the rubric. You're using resources. What are those 3 critical attributes we've been discussing? Kristen, what did Aisha say?
She said what was on the rubric, so text-specific, higher order, and
Okay, and we have clarifications of what those attributes are on the rubric. We've talked about them. You looked at them and discussed them yesterday. Good. So they're higher order, open-ended, and text-specific. And again, we can take those text-specific questions, open them up to other ideas as long as we bring them back to the text. Good. What is one way to go about asking good questions, thoughtful questions? Again, we all kind of have our different strategies or ways to do something, but yesterday I showed you my way of thinking through how I come up with questions. You may have a different process. Somebody want to volunteer something that was said at your table by either one of your group mates or your partner? Grant.
I was asking what or how questions.
Okay, so, and what, when you ask what or how questions, what are you looking for in the text to ask what or how about?
Well,
It's a crazy question.
You're kind of asking not like yes or no, you're kind of asking them to go deeper
Go deeper about what?
into the text about why they're right or why they're wrong.
Why what is right and what is wrong?
Answer.
What is, describe their answer in another way. If you're reading the text and giving an answer, that is your what about the text?
Opinion.
Could be your opinion, could be your interpretation, it could be your analysis, absolutely. So you want to ask why or how, what about the text? What does it say in the text that makes you think this? Okay, why do you think this based on the text? Good. What are other how or why questions that we might ask of a text in general? We would want it to be specific to a particular text, but in general, what types of questions might we ask? How, blah, blah, blah. Why, blah, blah, blah. And if you want to, you can go back and look at the model questions for I Hear America Singing to help you with that. If you reread those questions, David, I have to get those for you because you were out yesterday. If you reread those questions, those how questions, why questions, what were they about? Rachel?
How different pieces of author's craft and different things in the story affect the story and how we perceive it or see it?
You said so many key words right there. So we're talking about author's craft, literary devices. Why does the author use what he or she does to get across? And then another word that Rachel just said was perspective. How does it affect, how do the words that the author uses affect our perspective? How does the author's perspective affect what is written? You said something about message. How is the author's message conveyed? What is the author's message? Why is the author giving us this message? All coming back to, we talked yesterday morning about the fact that in order to really answer this big question, with each of the pieces of text that we look at over the course of the unit, we really need to look at what is the author's message or theme or central idea, his or her perspective, what is it about his or her context or life that affects the point of view or the tone we see in the writing, and then the purpose. Why did this person write this piece to begin with? Why this poem? Why this narrative? Why this biography? So looking at all of these and how the literary elements that the author uses contribute to that, those are all types of things we can look for in our how and why questions. And speaking of why questions, why ask questions? Why ask why? Aman, what did somebody at your table say?
Grant said something like you'll get a better understanding and it may change your interpretation of things.
Excellent. And that's something, and that second part is interesting too. As I walked around to all the different groups, it will help your understanding, deepen your understanding, make strong your understanding. Those were all things that I heard. Similar language that is connected to that. I heard people saying that it will clarify, or if something's confusing, it'll help you understand. And then, Aman, could you just repeat the second part of what you said?
It'll also change your interpretation.
And it may change your interpretation. It may change your viewpoint on something. And so, or you may think something originally when you read a text, go back, reread it, and then you say, actually, no, now I kind of think something else after questioning it and thinking it through. Great. Other possibilities for why we ask good questions? Kristen?
Make you think more, go deeper into your brain.
Deeper into your brain. I love it. I'm going in. Somebody call me back out. Good. That's, if you're going deeper into your brain based on something somebody else has written, you're probably looking at bigger life concepts, ideas, maybe what you believe based on the text or what you understand based on the text. Excellent. Because somebody else wrote it doesn't make it true. No. Okay, thank you. Just because somebody else wrote it doesn't necessarily make it true. So what is another reason I should question text?
It could be lying.
Maybe they're lying, maliciously, possibly, and even if not maliciously, with evil intent. Malcolm?
To get like the full story of whatever you're doing.
Okay. Do you remember yesterday, Christiana told us that during the snow day, she and her brother had a snowball fight. I asked her who won. She said that she did. And I said, I wonder if her brother would tell us the same story. Sometimes we have to ask questions of text, although I'm sure you won. There's no doubt in my mind that is what really happened. But sometimes that when we ask questions of text, it's to try to figure out what an author's bias might be, looking at the author's perspective. Is this just one viewpoint on a topic? Are there multiple viewpoints on a topic? Should I believe everything in here? And if not, why not? And so we really, especially as you get older and you're out and about living your life and you don't have a teacher guiding you through either your reading in English class or your social studies reading or science reading, you have to ask really good questions of what you're looking at, viewing, hearing, reading to say, should I believe this or not? That's important. Questions about questioning. On your desk, you should have your copy of I Too by Langston Hughes, your annotations on it that you did for homework, and the questions that you wrote based on it. With a partner, with the person sitting next to you, this is not a table activity. This is a two-person activity. You are going to share your questions with each other that you wrote last night for homework. Use the rubric to color code. What are the parts that are text-specific in red? We color-coded our rubric. We're going to color-code our peers' questions. What are the parts that are text-specific? In blue, what are the parts that show us that this is higher order? It's asking us to really analyze, dig deeper, go beyond the literal, the basic interpretations. And in pink, highlight the parts of the question that are open-ended, meaning that it can have more than one answer. After you do that, and you get your questions back, and you talk about the feedback that you give each other on the questions to make them as strong as they possibly can be, you're going to revise your questions, and I'm going to give you index cards. Your revised questions, the ones that you've cleaned up, made stronger, they're your absolute best questions that you could possibly ask at this point. You're going to put your name on the top of the index card, and you're going to list your questions. At the end of class, I'm going to collect these so that I can read the questions that you've written. But before we do that, when everybody at the table has his or her questions written, then you're going to use them to have a little mini Socratic seminar at your tables, to use the questions so that you all can lead the discussions about I Too by Langston Hughes. Okay? Can somebody repeat what we're doing?
We're discussing the questions that we made with our partner, and then on index card we're writing down our questions that we made on the card.
And then what are you doing with them?
Giving them
Good. Before you give them to me, what's happening with them?
we're figuring out what type of questions they are.
Okay. Yes, you're doing that at the beginning as part of your feedback discussion. You're going to put your name on them. The revised ones go on the green card. But before you give them to me, you need to do what? Brittany?
Have a Socratic seminar with your group.
Exactly. And I will be coming around. I will be joining your Socratic seminars because I cannot wait to hear what it is that your group is going to get into based on your reading, understanding, and analysis of I Too. Okay? I'm going to let you go ahead and get started. With the person sitting next to you, you're giving each other feedback on your questions. I will come around. If anybody does not have the homework, we'll figure out that situation. So I'll be there shortly. You can get started. David, you weren't here. So that's, obviously you're not gonna have that. What I'm gonna ask you to do for right now, ladies, I'm sorry to interrupt. If for right now, we can do a three-way kind of trade with the papers and give each other feedback in a triangle so that David has some time to actually catch up, read the poem. If you want to read this, make some annotations. And then, even though you won't have discussion questions necessarily written at the same time your classmates will, you can still participate in the conversation if you've read the poem, kind of kept track of your thinking a little with some annotations. Okay? And then we'll figure out getting the questions written later. Okay, does that make sense? All right, and I will give these to you now. This way you can go at your own pace. You're ready to move forward when you're ready. Kristen. Yes, a blue pen? Yep, you got it. I will get that for you. And are you all set? Everybody has homework? Okay, so these are for you for when you're done, so you can go at your own pace. And Kristen, let me get you a blue pen. You're welcome.
I wrote like a motion, she just waved, but you think about it, I mean,
There you go, kiddo. You're welcome.
I don't believe here.
Relate to
It was
law.
right.
Wait.
All right, everybody here has homework?
And if you looked up north,
Wonderful.
so no slaves in the north, and
All right, I'm going to give these to you for your revised questions when you're ready. You're welcome. We all have Okay, so you have Amon's, you have Annika's, you have Emma's, and okay, you have a question? You know what? That's okay. What I'm going to ask you to do after you offer him some feedback is go back, add a couple of questions to yours, build some questions as you're going, and then you will eventually, by the end of class, my expectation is that you'll have 3 questions to hand out. Sound good? Excellent. All right. And when you are ready, so you can go at your own pace, you can put your revised questions on those cards.
So I think
Who is working with whom?
we'll probably do more to the last.
Excellent, Mike and I.
The last poem because
Actually, no, Austin and I.
that has a direct link to the other one.
When you are ready, your revised questions can go on these cards. Everybody has homework. Does anybody have questions? Excellent. Okay, well then you have homework questions. She's messing with me. What is she doing? She's playing with this word question. It doesn't even seem like a real word to me anymore. I've said it so many times. You may. Really?
In one sentence.
In one sentence? Oh, I have to work on that.
that's exactly.
The prefix teach. I said 8 times in 1 sentence.
That's insane.
Teachers teaching are making this video to teach other teachers who make this teaching. I was like, what? My mind is just like blowing up.
I'm going to try not to do that in general because that's not a great practice, but when I see you, I'm going to see if I can do it as much as possible just to mess with you. Okay, good. My pleasure.
Maybe she was little kid and he might like get in her way or something. Or his personality, like maybe he's like darker.
He has to work in English, and he's usually not going to school. That's how you got there. I teach him English.
Yeah.
Because he's still leaving the house. You live about it now?
Yeah.
They want to make me roll.
And then
Also part of a lesson when we were out on questioning is that we went through this. We talked about how we labeled this section in red and talked about, this was really kind of confusing about what you know about questioning and just put it all in one sheet to help guide us. So one thing is that they're text specific and this describes what that means. We said, questions that are higher order are like those how and more questions that really get deeper, but beyond the who, what, when,
they were kind of saying it like questions.
ones that have more than just one answer. It's just not a yes or a no or right or wrong. That people can really come up with different interpretations and explain them based on the text. So we went through, and after people kind of tried their own hand, their own interpretations about Queen America singing, and we talked about it a little as a class, I shared my annotations of the poem that I wrote. And questions that I wrote based on this, and then we used this rubric to analyze the different parts of each question to see how each one was text specific, higher order, and open-ended. So if you want to use these as a model, as you're writing your own questions, you can use this as a resource, okay? So I'll have this for you as well. And in the meantime, I know it's hard with them discussing. Do you want, I know the computer will turn on the table for a little while to read and annotate, and if you feel like you can concentrate here, you can do that, okay?
Which would be no.
So what if your yes no questions? Right question.
Yeah. So I can write the brother for the other brother. Maybe write like a
So are you continuing to give each other feedback? Okay. So, all right, so what question are you giving feedback on, Destiny? That's in Connor's paper? Okay, so Connor, where is your question? Okay, what does that mean? What is the company and who are they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so tomorrow I'll be at the table.
Okay.
Tomorrow I'll be at the table.
So if that's a person, what does that mean?
Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am.
You are asking a question to better understand it. Are you able to come up with a response?
Yeah.
brother who they don't
What in the text do you Okay, what in the text makes you think that the word brother has family connections? What part of that makes you think that the family doesn't understand him? Okay, so he's separated. Destiny, how about you? What do you think?
But then why would you do that? Literal sense, it must be like.
When they say dark, they're not meaning bad. And then dark, like, yes.
Okay. Are there, if we go back to Connor's initial question, are there other interpretations? If that is an open-ended question, what does this mean? He said that maybe it's a misunderstood family member who's separated from the rest of the family. Is there
whenever
another?
the company comes, they come in the kitchen, so
Okay. Are there other possible interpretations of what that means? What in the text would make you think that?
We know that this is visible, I think, or at least during, because the hazard of violence, because the last poem we know was at the same time or after. Because
Okay, so you're using. Okay, so first, you think that the darker brother maybe is possibly referring to race, and the seeing how beautiful I am referring to that person as a person, right? It could be physical, it could be emotional. I'll be right there, Marty. I'll be right there. If that's the case, then, and I'm going to leave you to think about this as a group. I know we're supposed to be analyzing the questions first, but I think that this is an important question to discuss. If this is about race, then what is this poem saying? I'm going to let you discuss that, and then I want you to come back to actually analyzing with the rubric the strength of your questions. Make sure that if you need to, you revise them, and if you don't, that you're all set. Just make sure that you put those questions that you want to open up to the whole table for discussion on an index card with your name on it, okay? And I will be back to follow up. And just to kind of help out a little bit, if you're interested, I do have some question stems that may help you break down some of not only the parts of the poem, but once you've noted some of these things that you have noted about different parts or different possible meanings or different literary devices, how could you fit some of these notes into these question stems to help you form the types of discussion questions that we're looking for. So if you like this as a resource, that's here, and if not, you can continue. Yes. You absolutely may have this. How are you doing? So you're going to make this looks like more open-ended? I asked you a question and I answered it. That's silly of me. I'm sorry. How are you doing?
I'm not really sure if it made sense.
Do you know what it is that you did well and what it is that you did well?
Oh.
Okay. So I will give me an example of something you did well. Okay. And it's not the poet himself, it's just the narrator of his poem, the speaker of his poem, and you're asking somebody for an interpretation of what possibly will happen next, a prediction based on the text. I agree that is open-ended, higher order, because people will need to use evidence from here. So I agree with you. What is something that you will work on next for these questions? This is a very interesting question. I think you wrote this very nicely, and Kristen, I think your feedback is good, that just adding the specific text instead of this, but the question about why are you repeating this, what is his purpose in doing that, I think that's a great question. I think that meets all the critical attributes of really nice job. So as soon as you put that in, that'll be a very good example for you to put in your cards. And if you want to use this as a resource, you certainly may. Kristen, are you okay, sweetie? Those are all very, very interesting questions, and I think your group, based on what I've seen in all your papers and these questions as well, I think your group's going to have an excellent, very interesting conversation around those points. So if you just want to make sure that you have those listed, and I like the way you connected this to the big concept, and I hear America saying nice work. Yes. That's a good question. Wait, say that again? Can you Google it? Yes. Do you want to Google Langston Hughes? You can look him up, absolutely. Yes. I love the way you're using even the citations on the paper to make meaning. That makes me want to jump for joy. You're right. This was not written in 1994. This is just when it was published on the website. It was reprinted from earlier. I have an answer, but because we're using our technology to be self-sufficient, I'm going to let you do that. I'm proud of you for doing that. And your question about when this was originally published, why is it that that information came up?
When there were slaves being used, and we were wondering if Langston or said back when you were a slave,
Compressed.
so who was the doctor of the family and told you that you used.
Like mine says Langston Hughes, and it says that
Or like, also I'm the doctor go back to the academy. If he was in the Holocaust and he was like hiding it, that's because he was kind of hid away.
Very, very interesting. You are all really thinking through some critical questions. I'd love to see the questions that you have on your cards, and I'm really excited to hear the conversation that you're having around it. So I think you're at the point where you can just quickly jot down your questions on the cards so that I can collect those and see those and about 7 minutes now, oh my goodness. But I really would like, we'll continue this conversation block 4 when we meet again, because you have some great ideas going on. And I think that you're right. I think that your inquiry to find out when Langston Hughes lived might shed some light on the historical perspective.
He's just one person because he says that when we take this, the setting points would be SME in the kitchen, and we don't really have a reason for that.
You can say yes.
The 40, that's the here, 45, but I laugh at well, 41,
Rachel, that is very, very interesting and insightful that you would identify a key line and talk about the impact not having that line would have on the poem. I'm very impressed with that question. And I think it's such an interesting one to discuss. I think that's fabulous. Rebecca. What race? He was black. Yep. As a matter of fact, if you want to use
Was it in Missouri?
what was it?
Was it in Missouri where that person tried to go to college?
If you would like to use technology to find out more about either the author or the time period, you absolutely can. After you have your questions ready, we're going to, based on the time, we're going to continue this conversation block 4 too.
There was this man who was in college.
How are we doing?
Are we supposed to, we're supposed to write our own question, or are we supposed to write
Yes, your own questions. Because I'm going to collect this to see how your questioning skills, I'm going to use this to assess your questioning skills to see where you are as far as the criteria of good questions. Okay. Give me an example of a question you would ask. Because I know you ask good questions. I've heard you ask good questions. So I want to try to figure out here what it is you think you don't understand. Because I know you ask good questions. So give me an example of the type of question. If we were going to discuss this poem, all the technical mumbo jumbo about the rubric and all that aside, if we were going to discuss this poem as a group, what types of questions would you ask the group? What do you think is interesting about this that you would want to discuss? All right, I'm going to give you a... Let me see. These are all very good questions. I knew you understood. Yes, I will check in 1 second, sweetheart. So for example, just taking this, it's text dependent because you're using this line and you're asking why would this be? He's saying that this will be, why will this be? What is it about the situation, the context, the people involved? I don't know if you knew you were asking all of that, but you need all of that information to be able to answer that question. There are different possibilities. This is higher order, open-ended, text-specific. Yeah. Wow. You're smarter than you knew you were? I knew you were that smart. Don't be fresh.
Wait, so what would be the text again?
Ariel, I'm on my way over. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, we have 4 minutes, or actually 3 minutes. So what I'm going to ask you to do, if you haven't already done so, please make sure that your discussion questions with your name on them are written on a green index card. I'm going to collect, you can leave them on your desks, I'll collect them at the end of the period, and when we come back again, period 4, we'll continue to use, some of you have started to discuss your questions, we'll continue that discussion to make meaning of I2 when we come back. But right now you want to make sure that you write down your questions before we head to block 2. Okay, so. What does this have to do with the poem? I think this this is your strongest question. That you're talking about America as a whole country. How does this particular story, this particular individual, fit in within the whole country? Who is he as an American related to the whole country? I think that is very specific to the language that you have that's in the poem that makes it text specific. I think it's open-ended because there are multiple people that say different things about how is it possible that, what does that mean? Or how does the whole and the individual, how does the individual relate to the whole? And then it's higher order because you're asking about the relationship between different elements. There's a fancy word for that. It's called synthesis, that your brain is putting together all these different pieces of information to make meaning. So I think that this is your strongest question. I think you did a very nice job with this. I think that these questions are good and they're definitely text specific. I think you could probably come up with some very specific answers based on the text, so they might not be too open-ended. So you might want to think about how you can move forward to make them more open-ended. If you would like, if it's helpful, I have some question stems where you can kind of use part of the question and then fill in the blank with things that you noted that would fit there. What's going on? What's this right That improves the question and you're going to get more information from it, but there's still relatively only one, maybe two answers that you'll get. Please leave your questions on the table. I'll give you feedback and we'll discuss block 4. Enjoy blocks 2 and 3. What? Yep, absolutely, because you'll be back. Nobody else will be in here before you're back.
Yeah, personality.
You know how that's happening to all of them, right? Yeah. They've all died horribly.